Recording. Okay. Are we recording?
Oh, what I know.
It says we're recording. Okay. There we go. And welcome to Chip on Chip, an intimate discussion between the two chips. If only we had Chip Kid here, we could have a chiptych, but we don't.
One day when people are allowed to touch each other and be near each other.
And not in the quarantine zone.
Yeah.
So I'm Chip Mosher, the head of content for comiXology, and you are?
Another Chip Zdarsky, writer and artist.
And thank you for tuning in. We're doing this to support our friends over at Thought Bubble, one of the premier conventions in the world that takes place in the Yorkshire area of the UK, and is one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, this is going to be my first year going there, and nope.
Only in your mind.
Yeah, it sucks because everyone I know that's gone there said it's the best show.
It is fantastic. I think part of it is just Lisa, aka Tulalote. It's a show that's run by a comic book creator, and I think that puts a really different spin on it. And then I think being stuck in the north of England, which is picturesque and beautiful, and the people are super sweet, and it's just a fun time.
Yeah. Next year.
Sure. So we could talk about Chip Zdarsky, but let's back up a minute and talk about Steve Murray. Who is Steve?
Who is? Well, just like Lisa and Tula Lotte, the pseudonym. Yes, my real name is Steve Murray. Not a lot of people know it, weirdly enough. At first, I tried to keep it a secret because as Steve Murray, I was working for a national newspaper, and as Chip Zdarsky, I was doing kind of dumb, gross comics. So I tried to keep it as separate as possible. But then things kind of spiraled out of my control. And next thing you know, I'm basically living full-time as Chip, and Steve Murray is a distant past.
Do people still call you Steve?
Oh, sorry, was that call me Steve?
Do people still call you Steve?
My parents, my wife, old friends, and people who pretend to be overly familiar with me. Which kind of drives me crazy. That was like one of the first things that I noticed, like when I do comic conventions and people I'd known for years who knew me as Chip also were just calling me Steve casually. I'm just like, at what point did I ever say my name was Steve to you? Like, come on, I know what you're doing.
I'll never call you Steve.
No.
It's it's funny because when I tell people my name's Chip, I get Skip, Chris,
Jim.
Yeah. But I also get Steve a lot.
What, really?
And I think it must be some cognitive thing, because there's nothing in like my name is Chip that says like call me Steve.
Yeah.
Steve a lot. It's really weird. So there's
if I was to pick another fake name, it would not be Chip, because I always have to repeat it. I notice when I introduce myself to somebody, because they're always like, Jim? I'm like, nope, like potato chip. I'm like potato chip. But Steve, no one gets that mixed with anything else. It's a very boring, distinct name.
I say like chocolate chip cookie, but I'm not as sweet.
That's good. That's good.
So what's the difference between Steve Murray and Todd Diamond?
Well, okay, so when I was doing work as Steve Murray, I worked for a paper called the National Post, and I was kind of like a weird mascot for the paper in a strange way. Like I wrote and drew, and I did humor columns, politics, arts and entertainment. So I kind of worked all departments, and at one point I decided to do stuff for the financial section, and so I just created a character named Todd Diamond who gave bad financial advice. and shot a bunch of videos without telling my bosses, and then screened them for them, and they're like, "Sure, whatever, man." And the weird thing is, like, it's me playing a sad sack character, even more sad sack than I actually am. And I found out a few years later when I went to an accountant that that the character Todd Diamond was actually quite popular in the financial sector in Toronto. And one of his coworkers, when they found out that he was an accountant for Todd Diamond, he was like, "Oh my God, that's like the password on my computer." So I'm like a financial person's password. That's Todd Diamond's legacy.
That's cool. That's
It's
cool.
not cool at all, but yeah, thank you for saying that.
The thing that I don't know like how many threats you are. Like you draw, you write, you do like weird performance art stuff, and I think you have like such a genius for how you present yourself in the world, and then but you also I think you could have been a performer. I mean, didn't you run for mayor?
I did. That was another thing through the newspaper when we were trying to figure out how to cover it. It was like the 2010 municipal election in Toronto. Uh, I put forward the idea like, oh, I should run for mayor and like do everything a nominee would do. And so I went for it, created like a website. I did media appearances. I shook hands. I kissed babies. I did the whole thing. It was a ton of fun. Like I kind of miss that with comics. Weirdly, like the stunts. Like comics doesn't have enough stunts and
Yeah,
opportunities for stunts. You're just kind of
yeah.
sitting there writing a drawing, putting it in the world. That's it. And it changes too when you get older because you don't want to be the old guy trying to be wacky. You know, not that I'm like in my serious phase, but once in a while I have like this kind of idea in the back of my head, like, oh, what if I promoted this by running around town nude or whatever? And I'm like, no, no, I'm 44 years old. I can't be doing that.
And where did the sort of like disruptive performance art aspect of your persona, where does that come from?
I don't know. I mean, it started in college. Myself and my buddies, um, we were Andy Kaufman, and when Green came out, we were big into that as well. But we always tried to do things like that nicely, never mean. Like for a while, we were like just doing little videotape segments where like we'd be downtown, just kind of hiding, and then somebody puts like a quarter in like a parking machine, and we come out and tell them like they're like the 1 millionth person to put quarters in that machine. We just give them like $50 in quarters and like a parade, like just dumb stuff like that. And I loved it. I loved doing stuff that was kind of weird and for the most part like made people's days brighter and happier. Um, so I did a lot of that in college, and then once I was working at the newspaper for a while, it became pretty obvious that newspapers needed content, and I could kind of just keep pitching them like dumb shit, and 9 times out of 10 they'd say yes because they didn't have to worry about the different aspects. Like, um, if they commission a piece that's written, they need to also commission some art with it. If they commission art, they have to commission story. Like, but with me, I could just kind of do it all for them. Like I would write a piece and then do art to go with it, and then I do a video component. Um, so that made it a lot easier for the newspaper to roll with. And I put that into like my early comic stuff too when I started doing comics as Chip Zdarsky. Um, Dumb stunts, dumb websites, things like that. But now again, like now that I'm older, it's like I'm just tired. I'm so tired.
And how did the performance part of your life inform your cartooning and your writing and or vice
Uh,
versa?
I mean, it's kind of all part of the same thing. Like writing is performing, drawing is performing. Um, it's just that with actual performance, like it takes place over a set period of time. Whereas with writing and art, like you spend all the time crafting it, and then it's up to the reader how they take that in and over what amount of time. So it's the same thing. Like you're still trying to get a laugh or make someone think. It's just a different medium, really. Uh, like with the chip stuff, it's kind of all part of the same thing. Like I think someone follows me on Twitter or watches like my stupid videos, and then reads the comics. Like they're kind of getting all of it. Like they're reading the comic because they also like the stuff I do elsewhere, and everything informs everything else. Like it's all part of the same thing. It's like if you're a writer and an artist, like your writing influences the art and the art influences the writing, and if you add other elements to it like performance stuff, then that's also the case, right? um, which is also like why I probably write in a bunch of different genres. Like I kind of like to do a little bit of everything, and it might not be the smartest move for a career, but it keeps it interesting for me.
Well, speaking of writing, let's get into the comiXology Originals book that you did, Afterlift. Won Best Digital Comic Eisner Award, and was nominated for Best Digital Comic for Harvey Award.
But we didn't win.
You did not win, and but you did 1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Well, yeah, I accept that.
And so this coming February, Dark Horse will be publishing Afterlift in print for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And Afterlift is about unexpected ride share to a very special destination, hell.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with the story?
It's kind of weird. Like it kind of, I had the Genesis on it was like an Uber ride, just thinking of like the horrible scenarios that could be involved in this new gig economy, getting into a stranger's car, um, and yeah, like at the same time, I started thinking about like a lot of kind of like old mythologies. I was studying them for other projects, and thinking about the river Styx, and paying the ferrymen to travel into the afterlife. I started to what would the current version of that be, and then the two ideas kind of like smashed together as a result of that. Because there's that thing where we kind of scoff at like whenever something modern is being used in that context, but like back in the day when they're putting like coins in someone's eyes, like the coin is the modern equivalent then, like, and so it's not that much of a leap to upgrade it to phones. And
Sure.
basically there's the scene in Afterlift where the ferryman pulls out his like weird black iPhone, and like they tap the fee. I don't find that any more ridiculous than putting the coins on the eyes. So once I start to like pull that apart, then it became just a matter of like, well, what's the theme of this, and where do we want the characters to kind of go, and what do we want them to learn? It's a very different experience than writing like a Marvel or a DC book.
And you've written a couple of those, right?
Here and there. I always feel like I'm still new to it, but like because I haven't done a lot, but like I guess it all adds up. But the my collaborator on Sex Criminals, Matt Fraction, he once said to me that writing a Marvel book is like writing a continuous second act, and it's super true. Like there's no finality to a Spider-Man story. Right? You can kind of wrap up that story, but the characters can't quite learn their lessons from that story, because if you do that over the period of 60 years, every 5 issues, then they'll have learned every lesson, and they'll just be perfect characters. So with Afterlift, it was kind of my first stab at realizing a full story within the 5 issues. So that was that was a lot of fun, kind of planning that out as its own full thing, you know?
Yeah, I think that's you know, as a younger comics reader, you know, you're waiting, you know, you're reading X-Men and you're waiting for all the threads to
Yeah.
end up going somewhere, and then some of them do, but then a lot of them don't, and then it's like, okay, I think you know, there was definitely a time in my life where I liked that kind of storytelling, and now like I really would rather read anything, you know, novels, comics, or whatever that has a definitive, you know, beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, I love soap operas. Like my mom introduced me to soap operas when I was like 5 or 6, and I followed so many of them up until my teen years. Uh,
What was your favorite?
General Hospital was my favorite because it had a lot of spy stuff in it as well.
Yeah.
Um, Super cool.
Was General Hospital Luke and Laura?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was getting into Luca Laura stuff when I was like younger, and then it became, uh, Robert Scorpio and Frisco Jones. Like, anyways, like the coolest guys. There were evil twins and stuff, but like there's so much in common between soap operas and comics,
Oh
because
yeah.
once again, like those storylines have to continue, but they do have a built-in finality to them because the actors age. And so
Sure.
they can't do the same thing over and over again. Like, you know, the young sexy characters all of a sudden are like the matriarchs and patriarchs, you know, that run the hospital and show up once in a while. Um, but the Marvel and DC comics, they don't quite have that. Like, their thing is they keep introducing new characters or younger versions of characters. Um, like, you know, Miles Morales is like 16, 15. Peter Parker's like in his 20s, 26, 27.
Yeah.
But like, who's the immature one there? Like, does that mean all of a sudden you start aging Spider-Man up? It becomes, yeah, it's a very strange medium to work in.
And what is it like to work with someone like Jason Liu, your artistic collaborator on Afterlift, and then one of the artists that you worked with on like Daredevil or Spider-Man or
Yeah, I mean, they're all different. Like Jason, I know personally because he was an intern back at my old studio in like 2003, I think. Even back then, you could see that he was so dedicated to just drawing. When he did his own Pitiful Human Lizard, the speed at which he managed to put it out and have excellent quality storytelling was really stunning to see, considering he also had like a full-time job. And so he seemed like a kind of a sure thing for Afterlift, because I know his personality, I know what he likes, and I know how good and professional he is. But I didn't quite realize exactly how good and professional he is until we started doing this, and I could see the storytelling chops and like cars. Like he wasn't very good at drawing cars coming into this, and then he just like spent a couple of weeks just drawing cars, and he'd send me the sketches, and all of a sudden the cars are getting better and better. I'm like, how is this possible? How are you learning to draw this so well in a week? Yeah, he's stunning. He's a massive talent, and I think the most satisfying part of the whole comiXology Afterlift experience, besides, you know, obviously working with you, has been seeing people notice Jason more, and like winning the Eisner, knowing Jason had won and Jason was going to get a trophy. I was super thrilled about that because
yeah,
he's phenomenal.
that's
Yeah,
great. That was well deserved. Well
yeah,
deserved.
and even in Paris on colors too, like uh,
Yeah.
uh, just a beautiful lush palette for the kind of stuff that we were doing. Yeah, just the team itself was like just on fire the whole time, and I felt like the one that was always kind of holding everyone back. But I also knew I was the senior and the most, the most established, so I could kind of get away with being the, the lousiest part of the team.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. If anyone out there hasn't read it, it is available for no additional cost if you're a member of comiXology Unlimited, Prime,
Very good.
or Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah. But again, also out through Dark Horse
Yeah,
in February
2021.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
Going to be a beautiful trade. I believe a matte finish with a spot gloss logo.
Yes, that is true. That is true. I'm very happy about that.
So let's talk about your Marvel work. What's the, when I say that, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? What is the thing that you're most proud of so far?
Well, first, it just sounds weird. Like I'm still like a 10-year-old just being like, what? Your Marvel work? That's crazy. Yeah, it's the Spider-Man stuff jumps out just because obviously he's like the flagship character, and that was a huge deal getting to work on that title. And going from Spectacular Spider-Man to doing kind of a different take with Spider-Man Life Story, and I've got some more Spider-Man stuff kind of coming up through Marvel. That feels like the kind of character that I'll probably just kind of keep bouncing back to as I do different things at Marvel, just because there's so much versatility there. Yeah, it's very strange. Like I made sure, because the first Marvel book I did as a writer was Howard the Duck. And in issue 1, I made sure to put Spider-Man in the issue just so I could kind of check it off the bucket list in case they cancel me with issue 2. So I had some Spider-Man dialogue. There was maybe a thwip, like, all right, that's it. If I don't get to do anything more, I'm fine. And the fact that I've been able to do like 20, 30 issues of that character across a few titles has been pretty wild. Because I used to like dress up as that character for Halloween, like when I was like 5 and 6. Like there's photos of my mom with my birthday cake when I was 6, and it's Spider-Man, but you know, icing options were limited, so he was like just pink with some blue, baby blue. Like it was clearly the surprise. You just had a baby icing package.
That's
So
great.
yeah, it's pretty wild.
It's great. And so, what was harder character for you to write, Howard the Duck or Spider-Man?
Howard the Duck, mostly because that was a case where the character is identified with its creator, and that's about it. Like Steve Gerber, it was his voice that was Howard the Duck. You know, Bill Mantlo obviously, you know, took a stab at it, and a few other writers over the years, but baby. And so coming into that, I didn't want to try and imitate that voice. We were lucky enough that Joe Quinones, the artist on the title, was tasked with kind of redesigning Howard a little bit. And so once he was redesigned, it kind of made it easier for me to be like, okay, well now, what does he sound like now? So there's a lot more kind of, not full creation because the character existed, but adapting it more towards whatever my sensibilities would be, and modern sensibilities as well. So that was a lot harder. Spider-Man, you kind of have the voice in your head a little bit when you're writing the character because you kind of grew up reading it.
Sure.
And there's no singular voice for that character because he's been written by so many people over dozens of years. That made it easier. And part of the challenge on Spectacular Spider-Man was trying to hit the different types of voices that I was familiar with over the years. Like I kind of started the title off like a lot lighter and jokier and more sad sack. And then, you know, as the character gets more overwhelmed, it gets a little bit darker into those kind of Spider-Man stories about him, like, you know, leveling up. And then with my final issue, I got to write and draw it. And in that one, I kind of showed every range of view on Spider-Man because it was done with like in media res snapshots of people on the street talking about Spider-Man, and so you can kind of like talk about all the different voices of Spider-Man and the way he's portrayed and the way people would view him. That was like the kind of the summation for me of the character, and if that was my final Spider-Man thing, I'd be perfectly happy to walk away. But life story happened pretty quickly after that.
And then you vowed to change everything about Daredevil. How did that work out?
Oh, did I? I don't recall saying that. I believe I did not do that, and I have made it probably as classic a Daredevil run as one could possibly do without directly just copying what came before. Yeah, that's a super interesting title, because with Spider-Man, so many people have written the character, but there are a few kind of standout runs. Like they're standout writers and artists, but sometimes they don't even overlap. Like obviously Dan Slott wrote it for like 10 years, but you don't think of Dan Slott plus somebody on that title because he went through a lot of artistic collaborators. Daredevil, however, is very much a title with legendary runs, and there are only a few that don't quite hit that mark, and that was super daunting. But there's also the freedom kind of watching how people would take the character in different directions and still maintain that legendary status. Like, obviously I'm a fan of like kind of the Bendis Brubaker stuff. My heart belongs to Nocenti Romita Jr., that era, because it's just so wild and kind of moralistic and, talking about ethics. But then, Mark Waid and, Chris Samney go and do this kind of like this fun San Francisco take on the character, which, did not sound like a proper fit, but then it became just this amazing run. And then Charles kind of came on the title and gave it like more of the New York superhero vibe. And he kind of like straddled the line between like kind of the dark superhero stuff and like the more modern superhero stuff. Coming in, I kind of just wanted to harken back to the Nocenti, Brubaker, Bendis kind of ethical dilemma stuff for the character. I may have gone too far down that path. I can't tell, but yeah, like it's one of the only titles where you can just do whatever you want because he doesn't touch other things. Like he's not an X-Man, he's not like an Avenger. I mean, he has been, but not really. He's kind of just like the core of the street level. He doesn't sell like Spider-Man, so you don't have to worry about like running stuff by too many people. Like I did at least a dozen issues of him not in costume. Which you not get away with doing Spider-Man or Batman. Like there's just no way. But because of Daredevil, you just get away with it. So I love working on the book because there's a lot more freedom to do what you want. I don't think I answered your question at all, but
okay.
I just kind of went on.
So by the time this video airs, I believe Sex Criminals, the last issue, will have been published. So
yeah.
So what are your finishing thoughts on that series? I mean, that's really put you on the map in comics as an artist in a big way.
God, I better finish it. No, it's at the printer. Yeah, like it changed my life. There's nothing that came before and that'll come after that'll have as much of an impact on my life as Sex Criminals did. I was working at the newspaper, just doing my odd comics once in a while, and Matt and I decided to do this dumb sex comedy that we thought no one was going to buy. And because of that, I mean, everything changed. Like I had to quit the newspaper job to keep up with it. Been around the world promoting the book. Like, when you're in Moscow promoting the Russian edition of Sex Criminals, like it's a weird feeling. Yeah, it's given me, some semblance of financial freedom to be a bit choosier with projects as well. Yeah. And then, it made Matt and I lifetime best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also almost killed me. Like,
How so?
I'm not a natural artist. Like I like to draw, I don't think I'm very good at it. So even kind of the simple characters of sex criminals, like it took a lot out of me to draw the book, and because we didn't anticipate going further than 3 issues, I opted to do everything on it. Like Matt wrote it, and then I drew it and colored it, lettered it, designed it, added jokes, answered letters with Matt. Like each issue was me doing at least 2 full-time jobs to do every single issue, and then to oversee all the collections and things like that. Um, so in terms of a workload, like I'll never do that again. Like, there's just no way. Like my body hurts, my mind hurts. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. The idea of drawing another series, even if I didn't color it, it's so daunting to me. Um, yeah. Oh my god. Ugh. So it's a lot. Yeah. I mean, it took a long time to get all the issues out, but it still was 31 issues drawn, colored, lettered, and designed by me, and it's too much. It's just too much. I can't do it again. So yeah, it makes writing seem really easy. No offense to writers. Like now that my schedule is cleared of the project that takes up 40 to 60 hours a week, I'm finding the pace a lot easier. Even though I've got like 9 books that I'm writing, it's just like, sure, I can do that. No
So
problem.
as we finish this up, what would you tell an aspiring creator watching the zoo?
Jesus Christ.
Hang on the
There,
cheese.
I, there's nothing worse than advice from an old person. Nothing. I remember when I was in art school. At one point, they brought in these older illustrators. They were probably like my age now, to talk about their career. And like these guys were talking about like they're breaking into the business by being like the photostat boys in an advertising firm, and they talked about like their high level clients and getting $40,000 for a painting. And like I'm looking around the room like this is not relevant to any of us. Like their entry point into the business is so different than anything we would ever do. Like the next year after I graduated, I asked myself and a buddy asked our coordinator if we could come and deliver that lecture to the students and tell them 1 year out of art school. And it was so satisfying, and everyone got so much out of it because we just laid it out for them like this sucks. But one of the slides was like, how do you make a career as a freelance illustrator? One of our slides was photos of our wives and girlfriends and the dollar figure, what their salary was. And we were just like, hook up with somebody right now, somebody that makes some money, because you are not going to make enough money to survive.
Lord.
Yeah. So the advice I would give to younger people is to talk to somebody just a little bit older than yourself to get some advice, because they'll have recently gone through it and they'll be much more relatable than me. Like my advice is always the same: just write and draw. Like if you want to, if you're an artist, draw a bunch of things, make your own stuff, put it out into the world. There's not a lot more to it than that. If it's good, you'll do well. If it's not good, just keep doing it and you'll get better. For writers, what I usually tell them is to learn to draw.
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest part, is getting an artist, somebody that's on your wavelength, somebody that can draw, somebody that wants to draw for you, and somebody that can hit the deadlines. That's very rare for a writer to find. So I often talk about a friend of mine who was a writer stuck looking for an artist, and when he was 30, he taught himself to draw. And at first they weren't very good,
Yeah.
but it was good enough that he can make comics eventually. And then he got into DC Comics based on that as a writer, because he had final product to show somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, so learn to draw, man. That's my advice.
And so, last thing. So, lots of negativity this year for a variety of reasons. But what's your favorite thing about comics in 2020?
I mean, the paycheck is pretty great. It's pretty great. Oh man, I don't know. Yeah, it has been obviously not the best year on all fronts. Um, I found it really heartening when the pandemic stuff was like kicking in and comic shops had to shut down. Um, how quickly and how much creators and fans came together to try and help out.
Yeah,
Like it's comics is a small industry, like really. Um, the creators are fans. The fans, you know, sometimes want to be creators. The comic shop owners are fans and have the same kind of aspirations. Like we're all very much in it together, and and accessible in a way that people aren't in other industries. And I genuinely really love that, the fact that like we're all in it together. Like
yeah,
comics won't die. Like it might change, it might morph, it might be there may only be a handful of shops. Maybe there are shops that just sell pop culture stuff and some collections or whatever. But people will still make the books, and people will still read them.
yeah. It was great to see the community rally at the beginning of the COVID crisis. So anyway,
Yeah,
well, I think this is it. So
this is
say
it.
goodbye to all your fans, old fans and new.
Goodbye, goodbye, all 12 of you.
I'm Chip Mosher with comiXology, head of content, and
I'm Chip Zdarsky, president, and CEO of Zdarsky Incorporated.
that is our Chip on Chip panel. Thank you.